Thank you very much, fellow Africans. And, I am once again profoundly honored to present to you our 37th episode of the Change for African campaign. So, therefore, fellow Africans, being on Tuesday, we dive into our second pillar of the Change for African campaign, which is about the potential that we have as an African continent. As we had given you a glimpse before, or as we had agreed that this week I'll be using the African Continental Free Trade Area to help us illustrate or try and explain about our five pillars of the Change for African campaign this week. And so therefore, today being about potential, the very things we still need to focus since it's an African Continental Free Trade Area, meaning it's focusing on trade and what are some of the impacts of trade, what is the potential of trade if Africa decides to make sure that it optimizes its trading patterns and systems and whatever it is. So this is what we'll be focusing on today about the African Continental Free Trade Area in the side of its potential to Africa. What can it do to Africa by the by a chance that it's optimized in a way that it's up to its full potential. Because currently it's not to its full potential, because looking at other trades across the globe, in blocks like we have the European Union, but then we have the African Union, whereby it's only 20% in Africa. But then going to an example of Europe, a good example is 60% in terms of trade, how they trade among themselves. But then in Africa it's only 20%, which means we still have a very huge gap that are supposed to fill. And then so this gap, we need to see what are some of the ways that can be used to enable us to fill this gap, because we need to be very strategic in terms of how such gaps may be filled in the African Continental Free Trade Area. Because they have an ambition that by 2035 it should be able to create at least 16 million jobs, or the 16 million people or youth of Africa should be employed. So it is a good ambition, of course, in terms of creating jobs. But then what are some of the strategies that are putting in place to be able to achieve that as an ambition as an African continent? So that's another area that you need to look up to and see how they want to achieve it. And then and then some of the things you also need to understand is we have many barriers in terms of countries in Africa being able to trade among themselves. So we need to see how can we eliminate these barriers among ourselves, so that we can be able to trade smoothly among ourselves, so that our goods can be able to move. Let us try and everything that may hinder our trade among our continent, we destabilize every weakness that is coming, such that we are able to be among ourselves and make ourselves to be competitive globally, because currently we do not have a very huge say globally on the global stage. So we need to figure out how we are going to make sure that we optimize our full potential in the African Continental Free Trade Area, such that we are able to be in the global stage. Because being at 20%, even almost 20%, it is very minimal as an African continent, a continent of about 1.2 to 1.4 billion people. That are very huge population to be that way, because we can't compare ourselves with Europe. We must be far away we must be on the same stage as they are, or we must be above them. But then that is not what is happening. But then now let us see how we can be there, since we have not been able to achieve that over the years as an African continent, because we remain to be in shambles as an African continent, and we need to get ways in which we can be able to pass through these things. Because looking at potential, you speak about Africa should now be able to tap into its own resources and then use its own resources to carry out its own trade operations. We'll be speaking more about resources tomorrow, about our third pillar, which is about resources. But then we have a lot of things that we need to take to our prerogative and make them to be working. Let's make things practical now. It's time we have spoken a lot, but now it's time for African governments to continue to look on ways, figure out ways, collaborate among themselves, see on how they can improve this trade, so that as we progress into the future, there is more job opportunities being created. And these are some of the things that we need to make sure that they bring us to the global stage in terms of business. We lag behind. there is over dependence on imports. Africa, we still depend on many things. We still depend on importation from many continents and countries across the globe, which is not quite something healthy. It's not healthy in terms of the business environment, because relying on imports means if you are the money you're using to import is much than the money maybe that what you use to import is more higher than what you get from exports, then it means that you are making a loss. But then you need to be at a stage whereby our importations are a notch higher than our imports. That will help us to be more competitive, more profitable, because they're looking at increasing the African GDP about 430 to 500 billion dollars into the African GDP as a continent. So that is it's still an ambition, a very good one. But then let us see on how we can first be able to let the strategies that we're putting in place be able to be practical, and they can be working such that what we put across as an African continent in terms of trade is able to be achieved. So that is about potential. As an African continent, we have the potential of employing over 16 million young Africans. By 2035, we have a potential of being over 20% in terms of the intra-African trade. We have a potential to be above that. We have a potential to be to be competitive globally, to be on the global stage with the others. We have a potential to be on the table with the other who claim to be big boys and or big shares of the global economic or business market. So let us continue to strengthen the African Continental Free Trade Area, as this is an urge to the African leaders and those who are in positions of leadership to be able to make sure that they collaborate among themselves to make sure that Africa rises. Thank you, and have an interesting afternoon. Let's meet tomorrow as we discuss about our third bit of the Change for Africa campaign, which is about the resources that we own in the African continent with relation to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Good evening.